Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. So in today's video, we're going to tackle the Ice Golem's Peak hard mode. Now on this account, which is my main account, I am stuck on stage 7 of hard mode. And so we're going to go over to the dungeon and theory craft a solution to get us to stage 10. Along the way, I'm going to cover everything that you need to know about the hard mode version of Ice Golem's Peak so that you can put together your own composition to be successful at clearing this dungeon. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Just a quick reminder that our live stream schedule is in a bit of flux right now. The baby is at home. My wife and I are adapting. Things are going well, but that means that my schedule isn't as predictable as it used to be. I will try to consistently be there for Takeover Tuesdays, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, so you want to mark that on your calendar. And then we may throw in some Sunday streams from time to time. It may be me, it may be my editor, whose name is Sun, it may be both of us. So definitely click the like button for this video, subscribe to the channel to get notifications, and consider joining our Discord community where you can get the latest updates about our streaming schedule. Thanks so much for all the support. Now let's go tackle the Ice Golem. Here we are in the Ice Golem's Peak. As you can see, I have cleared stage 7, but I have not cleared up to stage 10 yet. Now, as a free-to-play player, when I'm trying to create new solutions like this, what I'm usually going to do first is look at the champions that I already have built and their current builds. And I don't want to rebuild too many champions. I don't want to over-specialize as a free-to-play player. So any solution that I use here, any champions that I use in a solution here, should be usable in other locations as well. If I do decide to build somebody specifically for Ice Golem's Peak, either a new champion or rebuilding an old champion, I want to make sure that that build is likewise usable in a lot of different content. So I'm going to start by not worrying about new champions. I'm going to start with just what I've got, and that may require me to be a little bit creative in terms of putting together a solution. Again, I'm not going to worry about the meta solution. I'm not going to worry about the best solution. I just want consistency and efficiency for now. And later on, if I'm more interested in Ice Golem's Peak for some reason, I can always start to specialize down the road. Okay, so the first thing we need to do then is go and refamiliarize ourselves with the fight so we know exactly what we're going to be looking for in terms of champions. Let's go here to stage 8, take a look at the guide. Now, a quick note, remember that each stage has a different affinity, so that is going to affect the solutions or the effectiveness of your solutions based on the affinity of the boss as you progress. But stage 10, I think of all the hard mode dungeons, should be void affinity. So once you get there, affinity isn't really an issue. So it may be a little bit tricky getting to stage 10, but then stage 10 should be relatively consistent and you don't have to worry about affinity. Okay, now let's take a look at the guide. Now, of all of the dungeons, I think that Ice Golem's Peak is the most similar in hard mode as it is to the normal mode of the dungeon. There are a few tweaks, few changes, nothing really serious that we have to worry about. But let's just go through the skills and the passive so that you know what to expect. So we have Glacial Eruption, which is the A1, that's the regular AoE. We have Debilitating Frost, that is the A2. This one has some significant effects that you have to worry about. One is a decreased accuracy debuff that does affect the fight. You need to deal with this in some way, because if you can't land your debuffs on the boss or the minions, you're going to struggle a little bit. We'll talk about that more as we go. In addition, it decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 30%. Not fun. So the fewer times this fires, the better off we are. And then finally, this cleanses the boss. And so likewise, the fewer times it fires, the better off we are. Now, the boss can be turn meter controlled. He can also be slowed. So both of those things are in play here. I would highly recommend using at least a slow, if not also some turn meter control. Depends on your solution, actually. In some solutions, you won't need it. Okay, now we have a big passive here, Frozen Reckoning. This is the same passive as in normal mode. This is when you hit these HP thresholds of 80%, 60%, 45, 30, and 15%. He does a big nuke. The nuke is more damaging if his allies are alive. He ignores 50% of your defense for each ally. He has up to 2. That means he can ignore 100%. So as 0% ignore defense, 50% ignore defense, 100% ignore defense. So you have several ways of dealing with this. Now, one way is to kill the minions. If the minions are dead, then he doesn't ignore your defense. It's still a hard nuke, and it can come in an unhappy time, like an unfortunate time. but at least you can survive it if you have, say, a decreased attack on him. Maybe you have a strengthen buff or an increased defense or a shield. So there are a lot of ways to deal with this if you kill the minion. Another option is to not kill the minions at all. You can leave them up. Now, something that you may not know about Frozen Reckoning is that it is not triggered by HP burns or poisons or smites, I think, as well. So as long as you don't trigger it with direct damage or something like Phantom Touch or War Master will trigger it. But if you don't trigger it with direct damage, you can actually pass these thresholds without it being triggered at all. So it is possible to kill this boss without ever having Frozen Reckoning go off. So that's another approach. We're going to talk about that because that is probably the approach that I'm going to be using. Now, this skill also applies a freeze. There are several ways to deal with the freeze. You can have enough resistance to just ignore the freeze. That requires a lot of resistance, but that is one option. You could also have a cleanse or a block debuffs. There also are a few champions who are immune to freeze or who like turn freeze around and send it back. So you could have like a reflect freeze. That's even another option that you might want to consider. Now, the Winter's Power passive makes the hard mode version of Tainted Crisis immune to poison and poison sensitivity, but he does receive more damage from HP burn debuffs. I highly recommend you go with an HP burn solution. Almost any HP burner in the game will work. You're going to have to build the team around that HP burner, build your composition, your champion build, all of that with that in mind. So are you going to have a whole team that's escorting your HP burner to the end? Are you going to have an HP burner who solos? Are you going to have a duo? There's all sorts of different ways to handle the waves and the boss. But if you're trying to get an HP burner to do the work here, just be aware that, you know, you need him to be accurate enough and you need him to survive. Remember that freeze that we talked about? We also have additional debuffs that will come out. We have the decreased accuracy. The decreased accuracy hits your HP burner. He may not be able to land his HP burns on the boss or on the minions. So, you know, we have to handle a lot of different things in this fight to make sure our HP burner does the job. Now we have the additional passives that are normal to every hard mode dungeon. Just a quick reminder about Awakened Weakness. That's the last one here. Your champions receive less damage the more awakened stars they have. So you can get a reduction up to 25% of the damage you take. You can also do up to 50% additional damage for the stars that you have on your champions as well. Sometimes you don't want to do extra damage, but you definitely want to take less damage, right? So it's kind of a balancing act here. Again, if you're going with a direct damage solution, like let's say you're bringing in Newt, then the more stars, the better, because not only is he going to take less damage, but he's going to do a lot more damage. And you're trying to basically one or two shot the boss in that kind of scenario. Whereas if you're using an HP burner, right, again, more stars can be good because of like taking less damage. That's important. And since you're using HP burns, you don't really care about the extra damage as much. But just be aware if you're using something in between, if you're kind of whittling down the boss with direct damage, that's the most dangerous situation, right? If you're using somebody like Phoenix because you want to, try killing the minions and blocking their revives, or if you're using Armiger for the same reason, that can be tricky. That's not going to be 100% reliable on full auto. That would be something that you could manual pretty successfully, but you're going to have some trouble, right? Because you're going to pass those thresholds with direct damage and he will be nuking your team. So you need to build the survivability into your team, maybe with shields or strengthen buffs. You're going to want revives, stuff like that. So, think about the number of awakened stars that you have on your champions that you're going to bring in. That will affect who you decide to bring in here to Ice Golem's Peak. Okay, so let's start with perhaps the most meta solution, the solution you may already know about, which is Artak. Artak is an AoE HP burner. That's great. That means he's going to land 3 HP burns, one on each minion, one on the boss. And that means, and then he activates it. So that means you get fewer turns, right? You have to deal with the boss for fewer turns. Typically, when you run Artak as a solo champion, he's going to be in regen and immortal. Now, my Artak is not. He's in a stun set with perception. So he is not in the correct build to be a solo champion for this. I could rebuild him because he can also solo things like Spider and Dragon, all that. And I might down the line. But for what I'm using him for right now, I'm not going to rebuild him. I want more time to plan that rebuild if I'm going to do that. Another HP burn option that is really good that I have on my roster is Walking Tomb Drang. I actually think he's very strong. He's an AoE HP burner. He only activates on one target. He would only activate on the boss. He does a little more direct damage than Artak does. And Artak has a decreased attack, which gives him maybe a little bit of extra survivability to Walking Tomb Drang. I still think Drang's a great solution. I think he could work really well. I have mine in Regen and Immortal. The problem is if you're doing a solo build, you need a lot of resistance because you need to resist the freeze and you need to resist the decreased accuracy. And I don't have either of these champions in high resist. Now, I don't know what the exact resist numbers are for this particular champion. We can always go to hellhades.com and check that out. So I highly recommend you do that. Let's go ahead and jump over there and see what the stats are for stage 10. We'll just look at stage 10 of Ice Golem Heart. Okay, so when you're here on the main page of hellhades.com, all you have to do is go over to the Raid Shadow Legends tab and drop down to the Raid Stages tool down in Tools. Click your encounter type. So we're going to Dungeons. We are going to Ice Golem's Peak. We want Hard Mode, and we're going to select Stage 10. Now, this will tell us the stats of all of the wave champions, the minions, and the boss here. Now, the boss is going to have the highest stats, right? So you can see that the boss here has 330 accuracy, which means you need 435 resistance to resist the majority of his debuffs. So, maybe 450 to be really, really consistent. That's a lot of resistance. Now, if you're building a solo champion, that's what you want to go for. You want that 450 resistance. You can also see that the boss's speed is 240. If you're doing a regen build, you need more speed, right? The more turns you get, the more you regen. Remember that Artak gets a speed buff as his health gets destroyed. His passive destroys his health, and that gives him additional speed. So you could probably build him a little bit slower. So maybe even if you might get away with like 230 or 240 on him. Obviously, 250, 260 would be better. For Walking Tomb Drang, you're probably going to need 280 plus. You're going to want him very fast. So you need a lot of HP, a lot of resistance, a lot of accuracy, and a lot of speed. So it's going to be stat intensive if you're going with a solo champion. I don't have that option, I don't think. I mean, I could potentially find it in my gear, but I would maybe have to strip gear from other champions that are, in other places. So I'm not going to be going with the solo solution, but it still helps for me to know, what the stats are here for the boss so that I can plan accordingly. Okay, so we have determined that I'm not going to use a solo strategy. By the way, just so you know, a solo strategy doesn't just mean one champion. It could. You could just run one champion, and then you could put 4 food champions in and just run them through. But another solo option would be running like a seer team. So you might do something like have a seer and then a reset champion. Sorry, that's not the reset champion. This is the reset champion. And you might have like a buffer, or maybe a debuffer. And so the goal here would be seer clears the waves really fast. You get the reset, you clear the second wave really fast. And then the boss kills all of your allies and Walking Tomb Drang survives and he solos the boss fight. So a solo composition doesn't just mean one champion. It can mean one champion. It's possible that you can build a champion to clear the waves by himself and clear the boss by himself. But if you're trying to speed that up a little bit, usually you have like a wave clear component or squad, and then you have a boss killing squad. And the boss killing squad is one champion, whereas the wave clearing squad might be multiple champions. So, that's just something to think about when you're building your team. But I'm not going to go with that at all. I really don't have that. So if I don't have an HP burner that can solo, and I don't really have a great setup for my seer composition, I could do that, but then the problem becomes I'm going to do too much direct damage to the boss, and then I'm going to get nuked and I'm going to die. So I want to kind of split the difference here. So what I'm thinking about is I do want to, in fact, bring in an HP burner, and I am going to use Artak, but he doesn't have the resistance, and he doesn't have the sustain. He doesn't have regen. So I need to bring in another champion that can handle the debuffs. So a cleanse or a block debuffs buff, that's great. I need heals. Potentially I may even need a revive if Artak dies. Now I could run him with a really good healer who just keeps him alive. So potentially I could run him with like somebody like Oella. That would be nice, right? Oella has a decreased speed. Decreased speed means the boss goes fewer times, so I have to deal with that A2 less often. That's the decreased accuracy and the turn meter reduction and stuff like that in the cleanse. So I would have to deal with that less often. Or, you know, you could probably even get away maybe with like a Rector Drath. I don't know about Scylla the Drakes might be able to do it. So you could have a non-cleanser who just has like a passive heal that fires even if everybody's frozen. That might be enough to keep them alive. So, you know, there are definitely different options here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go with a cleanser reviver. I'm going to go with Pythion. Now, here's the thing about bringing a reviver. He is an AoE reviver. I don't want to revive a whole team. The reason I don't want to revive a whole team is because if I revive a whole team and they come in and do a bunch of direct damage to the boss, that could trigger the nuke. So I'm going to try this just as a duo. And so hopefully Pythion is tanky enough to survive, Artak's tanky enough to get through, and then we get to the boss, and if Artak dies, Pythion can bring him back. So I'm going to very quickly show you my builds for these two champions. I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll quick look at what they have. So here is my Artak. You can see he is in a stun set and a perception set. So the good news is he does have enough accuracy. He has 368 accuracy. And if I go back to that page, right, I need 345 accuracy for stage 10. So he has enough accuracy on his own. I did that deliberately, by the way, because he's in my hard mode spider as well, which is another reason why I don't want to change him, because he's perfect over there. He doesn't have any resistance. He's not going to resist. He doesn't have 100% crit rate or anything like that. I don't want him doing a ton of direct damage. His speed's actually kind of low at 223. Not super fast, but again, he gets that speed buff. I'll put on the area bonuses here. You see he does get a little bit of bonus from the area bonuses. Nice and tanky at 84,000 HP, although only at 2.5k defense. That might become a problem. I might need more defense on him. I'd rather have him up around 3.5k, but it might be enough. It might be enough with Pythion to get through. Now let's take a look at my Pythion. You can see that he is in a protection set. He does, in fact, have a 6-piece bonus here. So he's got a chance of placing protected buffs. Doesn't really matter in this particular case, but he's got extra resistance, HP, and speed. Here are our stats. 88,000 HP. Again, a high HP pool. Much better defense here at 3.6k. Better speed at 261. Again, not doing any damage here. That's okay. He does have some resistance. It's not enough. It's not enough. He may get frozen at times, but he has the cleanse and the block debuffs, so hopefully that will be enough. He also has the heals. Now, one of the reasons why I decided to pick Pythion is because if you know Pythion, he has a heal on his A1. He will always heal the ally with the lowest HP by 5% of this champion's max HP, which is almost 90k, and he does that twice, so it's 10% HP. He also has the second heal on the cleanse, right, which is nice. And then he has that revive that also has strengthen. Strengthen's a really nice buff on that revive. And even his passive, allies receive 5% less damage from skills for each buff on them. So they will occasionally have, you know, the strengthen buff. They'll occasionally have the block debuffs buff, so they should take a little bit less damage as well. Artak has a decreased attack, by the way. So even if the nuke goes off, there's a chance I might survive it with the decreased attack and with Pythion's passive. I know that this worked at stage 7. I tried this out at stage 7. I haven't tried it out past that. Affinity is going to matter. Artak is weak affinity here. That might overcome like the composition. It might not be enough. But I should hopefully still be able to get through the waves and get to the boss. And so we're going to run this and we're going to see how it works. All right, let's go. Now I am going to run this on full auto. I put Pythia on the lead for a little extra resist, but it doesn't really matter. I could have run Artak in the lead because they don't have enough resist to really matter. As you can see here, Artak does get hit, and he's going to get hurt, especially against those force affinity champions. He may even die in the wave, so it's really up to Pythion. Is Pythion survivable enough? He's in a protection set. I could put him in a regen set. That would actually work really well as well, but I use him in other places, and I'd rather not take him out of the protection set. So I think out of the stages that are left, this is going to be the hardest one here because of the weak affinity. Now, I could bring in Drang. That's an option here. Drang is strong affinity. So if Artak doesn't get it done, I'll probably keep Pythion and try Drang as well. Now, it seems like they're getting through the waves. They're not landing all the HP burns. The stun set is nice, though, right? The stun set can land stuns. And remember, the stun set can't be resisted. So weak hits don't matter with the stun set. The stun set just goes ahead and applies the stun whenever the chance rolls, you know, so that's good. Does look like Artak's probably going to die here. One of the things about having a weak affinity tank is that Pythion doesn't pull a lot of attention. He gets hit by AoEs, but there aren't really any single target attacks going his way because they're all landing on Artak. So having a tanky HP burner like Artak allows me to really duo here. Again, I could use food with this duo, which I would probably do if I were running like a tournament or something. You can use an HP burner that is not this tanky. You know, Drang and Artak are very tanky. Other ones would be like Sulfurion is pretty tanky, I think. Saoirse, I think, is pretty tanky. But if you're using somebody who's squishier, like Sissia Flametongue, or maybe if you're using Mordecai, you're going to need additional champions around those champions in order to clear the waves. If you're using something like a Seer comp to clear the waves, then you probably don't want to have a reviver on the end, or you might want to have a single target reviver and put your HP burner in the lead so that that's the champion that's always getting revived. It's a little bit tricky balancing there. If you don't have a tanky HP burner, you need to get creative with your solutions a little bit. Okay, so 2.5 minutes to get through there. Now we apply that decreased attack right away. That's going to make both champions more survivable, which is awesome. You can see we don't have 100% health on this. This is, you know, we're pulling a lot of damage. There's the cleanse and the revive. Now we've got the strength, and that's going to help a bit. This looks tricky. We might not have enough here. We might have to bring in Drang instead of Artak. Looks like we're going to have to try that. All right. So again, the theory is there, but affinity matters. Now, Artak is strong affinity, which is going to make Pythion the tank. But the nice thing about Drang is he also has a heal. He can actually heal Pythion. And he's in regen and immortal. So let's go take a look at my Drang, and we'll show him off right now. Okay, so here's my Walking Tomb Drang. He's actually built for Sand Devil's Necropolis. You can see he is in regen. I thought he was also an immortal, but it's actually a speed set. I must have changed that at some point. If we look at his stats, he's got even more HP. 95,000 HP. He does have 3.4k defense, so he's tankier than Artak. He's the same exact speed, actually, 221. It's got a little bit more crit rate, but no crit damage on him. He does have just about the accuracy he needs. This could be a little bit worrisome. He might need a little bit more accuracy, but here we are at stage 8, not stage 10. And he does have, I believe, the accuracy masteries. Now, something else to note here, I didn't mention it before, but none of my champions have War Master or Giant Slayer. So here, Walking Tomb Drang isn't even in the offense tree. Pythion isn't in the offense tree. I think Artak is in the offense tree, but his capstone is over here in the support tree, so he's not running that as well. The reason is because those are probably, like War Master or Giant Slayer, those are the things most likely to trigger the nuke, right? To push that boss over the threshold by direct damage. We want to push the boss over those thresholds with HP burn damage to avoid the nukes. So, you know, be aware of that. You also want to avoid things like Phantom Touch, but you can use Brimstone. Brimstone is fine. Brimstone doesn't trigger the nuke, but Phantom Touch does. So that's something to be aware of. All right, so let's go ahead and put in Walking Tomb Drang here. And I won't make you watch this run as well. But what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to switch in Drang into the lead. This is 30% additional HP. We're going to get a lot of additional HP, going to make these champions much more survivable. Then we're going to go ahead and see if this works out any better. I suspect it will, and hopefully this will be enough to get through. So, yeah, I'm going to record this. Who knows if we're going to show it. All right, I will see you on the other side. Okay, there we go. As you can see, it wasn't fast. If you were paying attention to the run, you may have noticed a couple of things. One is that on the second wave, there were 2 healers, and I think 2 block debuffs champions. So I had to manually select the targets for the duo to get through. Otherwise, they just weren't going to do enough damage. But that's not going to be an issue if you're bringing in like a seer composition or a squad, a wave clearing squad. You'll just do enough damage to clear them really fast. But if you have a solo champion or a duo champion, that may be a little bit tricky. Again, each stage, the waves are a little bit different, so hopefully that won't be a problem moving forward. The other thing you may have noticed is on the boss, the first minion, the minion on the left, was the first target. So 80% of the damage was done to the boss without the boss ever being directly hit, except I think once or twice by a counterattack, because I have some revenge accessories on. So there was literally no chance that the boss was going to get triggered. Like his nuke was not going to get triggered because both Drang and Pythion were hitting the ad. When the first ad died, though, they didn't switch to the second ad. They just hit the boss. So there was a small chance there that the last threshold could have been passed with direct damage and could have been triggered. It wasn't. But that would make this potentially not a 100% clear, if that happens anyway. But that's just good to know that, most of the damage is going to go onto that minion, and the HP burns are going to be triggered on that minion, right? Drang does have a HP burn activation on his A1, I believe. So he's activating that minion's HP burn, which is doing damage to the boss. And then anytime the boss is taking a turn, you're getting a tick as well. So relatively safe run, definitely slow. But we saw that the RTAC team didn't get through here. The Drang team did get through here. Pythion was at risk a little bit. I definitely think the HP aura helped here, because Pythion a couple of times got down to about 15% HP, but then Drang also had a heal that would bring him back up to full HP. So I'm not sure that this would have worked with RTAC anyway, but we're going to push on. We're going to try stage 9. Now, the nice thing about stage 9, let's go ahead and do that. Stage 9 is now Spirit Affinity, so that means RTAC is back. He's going to be Strong Affinity. So I'm going to run this through, see if I can clear stage 9 and stage 10. Let's see what happens. I have no idea. Okay, so I will meet you back on the other side of this run. Okay, so not so much here with stage 9. Now you can see they did get to the boss. In fact, they got to the boss really quickly. RTAC is clearly a better wave clearing champion than Walking Tome Drang is, right? Because he has that AoE HP activation. So he's actually getting 5 times the activation on a wave. So they just cruised through the waves. Still had some tricky minions in the second wave, but he was able to clear through those just fine. They also split the damage. It seemed like some of the targeting was going to Pythion, some of the targeting was going to RTAC. But the damage here at the boss is too much without a regen set or without a third champion maybe providing additional HP. They just get chunked down too fast, no regen set, and therefore they die. So I have to go back to the drawing board and I have to find some other composition that's going to get me through stage 9 and then stage 10. So there are a couple of options. Now, again, I could rebuild somebody in a regen set. I may do that with RTAC eventually. I'm not going to start there. I want to think about other things that I could do. One thing that I could do is I could certainly bring in a second HP burner. So I could bring Drang back in, put him in as that HP lead. Remember, he does have a heal, I think on his, forget if it's his A2 or A3, whichever one's not the AoE HP burn. And that levels out the HP levels of all the champions. So it heals everybody back up to full, basically. That's usually what it does. So this might be enough. Another option would potentially be to speed up the team. Maybe get more turns, come back around to those skills a little bit more quickly. Maybe bring in somebody who's got additional heals. I could get a slow on the boss. That could be good if I could do that. So potentially I could bring in somebody like Elva. I could bring in somebody like Syl of the Drakes. I could bring in Rector Drath. I could bring in Oella would be good. We talked about Oella earlier. So there are some options here. I also like, I like Wither. Wither brings in some defenses as well. Anybody that you bring has the potential to hit the boss. And that could trigger the nuke. So, for instance, Wither has her A1 is her attack. It's an AoE. Whereas it's possible that, for instance, Syl of the Drakes might just hit the minions like we were talking about with the last stage, right? That it seems like everybody targets the first minion until the first minion's down, and then they target the boss. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to try something along this line. I could also do, by the way, I didn't think about this earlier, but I like the idea of Doom Priest. Right, Doom Priest provides that cleanse, that passive heal, so she could help as well. She does give an increased attack, but nobody's hitting with attack except her. So you could even turn off that skill if you wanted. Just have her use her A1. Her A1 hits so weakly that I don't think she's... First of all, I don't know that she's going to hit the boss at all. But so here's a lot of extra survivability. It's a full team. Probably won't be that fast. But let's go ahead and see how this does. All right, there we are. It was overkill. I didn't need everybody. They didn't come close to dying. You can see they cleared it in 3 minutes and 34 seconds, 188 turns. This was a very good team, and it made me think about the fact that I think if you have Doom Priest and Scylla the Drakes, those 2 champions alone might be enough when combined with an AoE HP burner. Scylla the Drakes helped on the waves with the AoE stun. I think you could turn off her AoE stun against the minions if you want, or you can leave them on, because she does hit the boss with the AoE. She generally applies her slow to the first minion, not to the boss, so you don't really get the advantage of her slow or turn meter decrease on the A1. I would definitely turn off Doom Priest's increased attack. There's no reason for it at all. I didn't bother doing that because I didn't put it into the AI. But that's an extra animation that you don't want to have to deal with. So you could definitely get faster than this. I think Drang was helpful, but again, I think it was overkill. So potentially, you could simply do, let's say, Artak, Syl, and Doom Priest in this composition, with Artak not in a regen set. As long as your Syl and Doom Priest are tanky enough, they're going to keep each other alive and cleanse, and if Artak ever dies, Syl the Drakes will bring him back. So that's a consideration. I don't know, they would get less tanky if you took out Drang's aura. I don't know how that would have an effect overall. But it felt like Pythion was extraneous here. It felt like that was more healing than we needed. We definitely didn't need nobody needed reviving. Nobody died. Nobody came close to dying. So you could definitely pull out at least 1 champion here, maybe 2. But yeah, so let's go up to stage 10. And now we're in Void Affinity. So I think what I'm going to try here is I'm going to pull Drang out. And I'm going to pull... I'll just pull Pythion into lead, and I think we'll try this instead. Just see, like, do we even need the Drang? Does Drang speed things up, slow things down, whatever? Again, this may still be overkill, but I want it to be as consistent as possible. So let's go ahead and do stage 10. And I'll show you this run, because what you'll find is that the clear here is actually pretty quick. The waves get cleared out pretty quickly. Like I said, you can see that extra animation from Doom Priest you could turn off. That would speed things up a little bit. The AoE HP burn activation is quite nice. The stun set actually does play. You can see that there are stuns that come out. The wave does get some turns. You're not killing them so quickly that they don't go at all. So here you can actually see I have 4 stuns out there between Scylla the Drakes and Artak's stun set. We get a nice bit of crowd control there. Again, if you had Artak in a regen set, you wouldn't get those stuns, but then he wouldn't need as much help surviving. So it's kind of a trade-off if you want to build Artak in sort of a solo build or not. So this looks like it's going to be under a minute clear for the first wave. On the previous stage, because Artak was strong affinity, we cleared the first wave in like 35 seconds. But this is actually, now with the revives, it's going to be a little bit slower. Those revives. Every stage has different waves, so you may find that on the way up, there are stages that are harder than stage 10, so be aware of that. It can help to manual, right? You're not trying to farm stage 7 or stage 8. You're trying to farm stage 10. So if you're struggling with stage 7 or stage 8 or stage 9 in terms of waves, manual the fight or swap out, champions based on affinity to try to get through. All you need to do is get through to stage 10 and then have a reliable, consistent 10, and that's usually the goal for a free-to-play player. Again, we're doing this with 4 champions instead of 5, so we could put in some food here. But yeah, let's go ahead and run this through to the end so you can see how it unfolds. Hopefully it takes down the boss. I think it will. And I'll see you back here in just a minute. And there we go. Stage 10 cleared, 4.5 minutes. That's just around acceptable for me. So usually under 5 minutes clear. I feel pretty good about a stage 10 hard mode. I'll work on speeding this up. It may be that bringing back Drang could speed it up. I could use another AoE HP burner like Sissy of Flame Tongue, who I happen to have as well, or, you know, some other wave clear champion. Again, it didn't feel particularly at risk, right? This felt like high consistency. Artak did die once, I think, maybe twice, but he was brought back by Pythion. Didn't feel like anybody else was at risk of dying. I'll show you my Seal of the Drakes build and Doom Priest build just so you see what they're built at. I don't think either one is built particularly well. They're not built poorly, but we have Syl here in one set of Immortal, so she's got a little bit of additional sustain there, and you can see her stats. Good HP at close to 80k, good defense at 3.8 K defense, and 220 speed. So the one thing I'm really lacking in this team is speed. I don't have an increased speed. I don't have a speed aura, and my champions aren't fast. I think additional speed would make it a lot easier, would potentially clear faster, because you would get more HP burn activations and kill the waves faster, which meant fewer animations from the enemies. Same thing with the boss, fewer animations from the boss. So I think you could potentially lower this time to, say, maybe 3.5 minutes with this composition, just with a few tweaks in terms of speed. But again, pretty good build from Seal of the Drakes, not ridiculous. Remember, this is an end game dungeon. This is stage 10 hard mode. So you should be able to get at least reasonably close to these stats. Maybe you only have 3.5k defense, but you have 240 speed on your Syl or something. You know, like, there are going to be some variations there. And if we look at the Doom Priest, the Doom Priest does have 5-star Ascension. And remember that the passive reduces the damage she's taking by, I think, 20% or something like that for 5 stars. Again, she has one set of Immortal. Again, not super fast, not super well built, but not bad. You know, 74k HP. Does have 4,000 defense, so decently tanky there with the defense and HP. 215 speed again, and not a lot of resistance. You know, she doesn't need resistance. Her passive is a cleanse, so not something that you have to worry about. Again, the faster she runs, the more heals she gets, the more cleanses she gets for the rest of the team. So I think probably the weakness of this composition would have to be speed. Okay, but there you have it. Again, HP burn is definitely the way to go, because then you don't activate that nuke from the boss. I think the meta is a solo Artak. I think it is. Something like that. It could be maybe double HP burners, or it could be like a seer comp that clears the waves into an HP burner who solos the boss. That would require a complete rebuild for my Artak, and I'm just not willing to do that at the moment. So again, that free-to-play mentality is find a solution based on the champions that you have. I didn't have to rebuild a single champion. I didn't have to change a single mastery. I didn't have to change a single piece of gear. I have the champions built where I need them to go. It's not perfect. That's okay. It's really okay. How often do I farm Ice Golem hard? Basically for tournaments, for fusions, and that's about it. So this feels good to me for now. Again, I will work on speeding it up, but I'm not too fussed. All right, I hope you have found this guide helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Additionally, let me know your free-to-play solution. If you're not using like the meta solution, if you're not using the seer comp into a solo Artak or something, let me know if you have an interesting team composition. We'll pin those. We'll put those so other people can see them. Maybe I'll make a video about them in the future. All right, that is it for me today. I have been Colred. Thanks so much for hanging out. I will see you in another video soon.